there is a pain that exists in you that is so deep, so profound, so intrinsic, so core that yes, it shows up in your psyche, but it also shows up in everything you do. Every decision that you make, every relationship that you have, every goal, every dream, every single part of your identity. I mean, that's kind of tea. But thanks to astrology, or should I say AstroloTea, that pain has a name. It shows up in your birth chart as a celestial point known as Chiron, and it has been doing the most your entire life. Like truly, it is the reason that you cannot seem to get out of certain spirals or patterns or storylines, and they keep coming up again and again and again. But maybe, honey, there's another way we should be looking at it. Maybe Chiron isn't trying to ruin your life after all. Maybe it is trying to help you heal. Today, we are talking about your Chiron. Yes, honey, Chiron in your birth chart, what it means for you, and how this is truly the key to unlocking your greatest potential in this lifetime. This is a deep, steep, so honey, why don't you grab a seat? Hello, and welcome to AstroloTea with Aliza Kelly. I am your host and your spiritual friend, Aliza Kelly, and I am so happy that you're here. Welcome to our Wednesday tea party. Every single week, I am serving 2 episodes. On Wednesdays, we have our tea party where we unpack different parts of astrology that actually shape your life, like what Chiron is doing in your chart, which is what we're covering this week. And then on Mondays, I have your weekly brew, where I decode the most pivotal astrological events and we talk about the theme of the week. This week is all about big healing because Chiron is moving into Taurus for the first time since the 1970s. So it is tea. I have horoscopes for every single sign. If you missed your Monday horoscope, these horoscopes are not just about your week. They are about what you can expect with Chiron moving into Taurus and sort of like working through these past 7-8 years with Chiron having just been in Aries. So it's a lot. Definitely tune in if you haven't had a chance yet. But before we get into today's episode, which is all about what Chiron is doing for you in your birth chart, where it was when you were born, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for supporting the show. If you haven't had a chance, take a minute to rate it, review it, and follow, subscribe to AstroloTea wherever you are listening, and then maybe somewhere else too. You know where I am. I'm on Apple, I'm on Spotify, I'm on YouTube. I'm wherever you get your podcasts. And I love reading all of your comments and reviews because it really helps me understand what you want, what you're looking for, what you're excited about, and how we can keep building this gorgeous, stunning community and create something really, really special with astrology in the year of our Lord 2026. Are you ready? Of course you are. The tea party begins now. We've been waiting for you, so let's go. Welcome back to AstroloTea, our Wednesday epi, our weekly tea party. This is where I serve all of the brew that is fit to sip. By the way, do you know what that is a reference to? Because I have been lulzing, obsessing, loving it for the past few months because it was one of the musings that came to me when I was building the show. So all the brew that's fit to sip is a reference, a play on the New York Times slogan, all the news that's fit to print. And for some reason, I vividly remember one of my 7th grade teachers impressing that upon me. Listen, listen, kids, you never know what you are going to end up pulling from and pulling out of the recesses of your mind when you are in a manic, hyper-focused state. That's all I'm saying. If it's in there, it's something you can work with. Am I right? And that is kind of tank, which means there are no coincidences, because today's episode is also about something that you are usually introduced to when you are very, very young, in childhood, maybe even younger, maybe in your toddler years, maybe in your baby pre-verbal years, maybe even in the womb, maybe even karmically from a past life. And it stays with you in this life for the entire duration of your ride, forever and ever and ever, forever and ever and ever, as long as you are here. And no matter what you do to reconcile it, No matter how much your life changes and evolves and adapts, that never goes away. Yes, baby, we are talking about Chiron, one of the most fascinating, complicated, emotional, and profoundly revealing placements in your birth chart. And today we are going to be unpacking what it means for you. Yes, you, because honey, you got Chiron somewhere. And we got to talk about it. We got to take a look at it. We got to make sense. Make it make sense. Yes, we can. Yes, we will. Now, if this is the first time you are hearing about Chiron, amazing, great, fantastique. There has never been a better time because Chiron in the sky right now is shifting into the sign of Taurus for the first time in 50 years. Yes, that's 50 years, which means that all of us are going to be redirecting our attention to this very important, albeit lesser discussed, placement in the sky and placement in our chart. Now, when you pull up your birth chart, that's based on your date, time, and location of birth. You know I recommend Time Passages as the app. You can spot Chiron because it looks like a little key. And some astrologers actually even say that Chiron is the key to your birth chart, which I love because it really is a major unlock in terms of understanding why you are the way you are. So take a second, take a minute to make sure you know where your Chiron is and the sign that it is in. What zodiac sign is your Chiron occupying? Because that is what we are going to be exploring and unpacking and giving smooches to at the tea party today. Interestingly, we haven't had that many decades of working with Chiron in astrology. It is a relatively new archetype for us to be interpreting and storytelling around because this comet, Chiron, is actually not even a comet, it's actually a centaur, a classification of a celestial body that sort of exists between a comet and a minor planet. And Chiron in mythology is also a centaur, and we're going to talk about that. Tank, we love to see it. But anyway, we only just discovered Chiron in 1977. So we have not had it in the astrological lexicon in the world of astrology until very recently. And also what's crazy and wild is that when Chiron was discovered in 1977, Chiron was in Taurus, which is where it's about to go again. And it hasn't been there since that time. So no doubt on a collective level, we are on the precipice of experiencing a cultural Chiron return since Chiron is going through its Chiron return from the time that it was discovered, and Chiron is about healing. So we are all collectively going to go through some sort of a Chiron return around healing. Maybe these are going to be breakthroughs around mental health, right? In the same way that in 1977, that was the exact timing, like literally the exact timing that the very massive, very important, very landmark concept of post-traumatic stress syndrome was named and incorporated into the medical world and incorporated into our understanding of mental health and the impact of trauma, minor trauma, acute trauma, major trauma, and how this informs a life as a before and after experience. Like that is tremendously major, huge, groundbreaking, and is part of Chiron's discovery, right? Like we discovered Chiron at the same time that we finally were able to create language around trauma. Tank, right? There are no coincidences, and it's tea. And with Chiron about to come back to that same place, like, I wonder what's going to be next. So yeah, I wonder what's coming up next. Maybe it's going to be something around, oh, I don't know, the implications of the internet or social media or AI or even the micro traumas that we experience every single fucking day from the most horrifying push notifications that are constantly blowing up our phones. I'm going to be really curious to see what this cultural societal Chiron return from the time of its discovery yields. So yeah, on both a collective and a personal level, Chiron is really important. Chiron represents our deepest wounds, along with the fears and anxieties and challenges that emerge and calcify around them. Chiron's mythology is so beautiful and so dramatic and so powerful. I mean, come on, you know that the classical Greek and Roman mythology is always a sleigh, but Chiron's story is like, oh my God, so poignant, so heartbreaking, really one of my favorite tales. In Greek mythology, Chiron was a centaur. And just in case you didn't know, a centaur has a body of a horse and the torso of a human. So literal origin story from Chiron, which I feel this part of it is actually very rarely and infrequently talked about, maybe because it is so like hardcore, is the fact that Chiron is the son of Saturn. Okay, listen. Chiron is the son of Saturn. This is such an important, like, critical arc in the whole journey, because maybe you recall that Saturn is responsibilities and maturation and like the burden of getting older and just like feeling so indebted and, you know, at the mercy of the responsibilities of the world, right? We go through a Saturn return. It's when we have to grow up. Saturn broadly is like how we deal with aging, how we deal with time, how we deal with like the hardships of life, right? And maybe you also know that Saturn and Saturn's mythology is psychotic. Saturn ate his children like a fucking sicko freak because he was afraid of getting older and being overthrown by them. And once Rhea, Saturn's wife, realized that Saturn had lost his damn mind, and by the way, Saturn's dad, Uranus, was also doing some freaky shit like that too. Saturn, gobbling up his kids. So Rhea is like, no, this is not happening. Has Zeus, aka Jupiter, gives Saturn, the freak, a bag of rocks and is like, oh, here's your son, you can eat him now. But actually, she took Jupiter and went into hiding. Slay mommy. Well, did you know that when Saturn realized that Rhea and a child were in hiding, he began searching for them. He began looking all around, so fucking scary. And of course, because this is also Greek and Roman mythology and they're all philanderers and you know, womanizers, in the process of trying to find his wife and get to his child so he could then eat his child, he like runs into a nymph and is like, ooh, hottie, this nymph named Thalira. And while he is like also on this quest of doing something horrible, he's like, oh, let me just have like a little side quest affair. So of course, he's getting down with Thalira, the nymph. And as this is happening, Rhea, his wife, stumbles upon the scene like mid-fornication, and he turns himself into a horse, Saturn, gallops away so that he's not going to get caught. And then obviously, Thalira ends up pregnant and gives birth to a centaur, which is a testament of Saturn being a shady motherfucker who fled the scene. So Thalira's son is now Chiron, half man, half horse. And Thalira, when she sees her son, is so horrified by him, probably because he is a product of like such pain and trauma for her, that she's like, I cannot look at this creature. Please, like, I cannot face this child. And she begs Saturn to turn her into anything other than anthropomorphic so that she doesn't have to have the consciousness to face her shame. So then Saturn turns her into a linden tree, and she doesn't have to deal with having a centaur Chiron son. I mean, what an origin story, right? And that's why when we talk about Chiron, and we're going to get more into the symbolism of Chiron, of course, but when we talk about Chiron, we're talking about wounds that predate your sheer existence. Chiron as a myth, Chiron as an archetype came into this world through this multi-layered tragedy and shame, and then was literally abandoned. Saturn, his dad, a sicko, right? His mom shames him, shames herself so much that she makes herself not even a human anymore, doesn't even have the consciousness to care for a child. But thankfully, things started turning around when Chiron was discovered by Apollo and was then subsequently raised by Apollo and his twin sister Artemis, who were very cultured and sophisticated and really taught Chiron how to be a thinker. Artemis taught him archery and hunting and strategy. And through this, Chiron became a very notable scholar. In fact, some say that Chiron was actually the inventor of pharmacy and surgery and medical things broadly, and was also an astrologer, which is tea because, spoiler alert, like Chiron is a story of healing, and we know that astrology is a tool for healing. Yes. Anyway, Chiron, by the time Chiron was an adult, it was very clear that he was not like the other centaurs. And maybe it was giving pick-me centaur energy, but it is true that the centaurs in astrology were really very bro-y, like truly very toxic masculine bros. They were always drunk and sloppy and brutish and just like overall very, very problematic in like everything they did. They also had a different lineage. Chiron is the only centaur who was the son of Saturn, and then therefore half-siblings with Pluto and Neptune and Jupiter. So Chiron was different than anyone else. Chiron was a scientist and a healer and an astrologer and an herbalist and an oracle and just like this amazing source of wisdom, right? Like truly a multi-hyphenate king. And his role in this classical mythology is that he was a teacher. He was mentoring like the best and the greatest. He had students like Achilles and Hercules who adored him, right? But also some more foreshadowing. Despite all of Chiron's wisdom, he had a deep core wound that ended up manifesting as the physical wound that killed him. Dun, dun, dun. So the story goes that Chiron was at a dinner party and Hercules was there and he was like, I want wine. I mean, also fair, it's a dinner party, but took it too far. Popped open not just any wine bottle, but a bottle from Dionysus, which means that it was like really boozed up, right? And he opens it up. The smell attracts all of the crazy bro alcoholic centaurs and they try to storm the cave dinner party. And Hercules, being Hercules, gets into a whole tussle with them, right? And he's throwing arrows and he's taking Chiron's medicine box and like dipping arrows in Hydra, which is like the most lethal poison that you can dip an arrow in. And, Chiron was obviously like, came strapped because he's the pharmacist. He has all the medicine. Guess what happened? One arrow ends up hitting Chiron in the leg and he was poisoned. And because it was dipped in Hydra's poison, like he's not going to survive. He's going to die. But he can't because Chiron's daddy is Saturn. So no, he can't just die. He is actually immortal. So he's poisoned by his own medicine and his sad and traumatic journey into the world with his fucked up dad comes back around because even more than the injury and the pain itself is the fact that Chiron can't die. There's like no way out. He has to suffer because, get this, divas, with all of the wisdom and the skill and the gifts and abilities that Chiron has, Chiron cannot seem to heal himself. So he's in pain, he's suffering, he's struggling, he's trying to find the antidote, he's trying to remedy this, he's trying to turn this ship around. He can't. So now he's just in this endless, chronic, immortal pain. I mean, what? It's such tea. What a story. What drama. Okay, so eventually Chiron does end up striking a deal with Jupiter, his half-brother, exchanging his immortality for the freedom of Prometheus. And who was Prometheus? Oh, just the Titan who brought fire to the humans and then was eternally punished by Jupiter? Yeah. And Chiron said, please, let me trade with him. Chiron, what? You legend, you martyr, you self-sacrificial philosopher, scholar, astrologer. So there you have it, okay? Chiron, the wounded healer, the wounded warrior, and you have Chiron in your birth chart because everyone has Chiron somewhere in their chart, which means somehow, somewhere, some way, this mythology is also yours. That's tea. Your Chiron placement, wherever Chiron was when you were born, illuminates your deepest wound, the insecurity, the grief, the fear, the aches that follow you through your life. And the wounds that Chiron speaks to are so deep, so core, so primordial that they're really the wounds that were assigned to us. In other words, they speak to conditions that were so far out of our control that by the time we became conscious of them, it was already too late. They were already embedded within our identity. But what makes Chiron different than like the narratives around Saturn or Pluto, for example, is that Chiron still has that deep philosophical, sensitive, almost poetic essence to it, right? Like Chiron needs tenderness. Chiron needs awareness and compassion. Chiron needs like a mommy and daddy. The wound may never disappear entirely, but healing it becomes possible through how you care for it and how you care for others through it. Because very beautifully, Chiron also reveals where you naturally become a healer. Because the places where you have suffered are the places where you have the ability to develop immense empathy and wisdom and even generosity, right? The friend who grew up feeling abandoned becomes someone who has the most amazing dinner parties and events and like always is bringing people together, right? The person who felt very misunderstood by their family knows how to help other people feel seen for who they really are. The person who struggled with self-worth ends up becoming a fucking motivational speaker who helps others tap into their own leadership capabilities. Go off. Chiron reminds us that our pain is meaningful and that our stories matter. What happened to us matters. What we have lived and seen and endured, like actually, yes, honey, it matters. Chiron speaks to the process of learning how to live with the pain, right? How to understand the patterns in our life and how to transform difficult experiences into compassion for ourselves first. And eventually for people too. There's really an alchemy to Chiron that I find so beautiful and so moving because Chiron as an archetype reminds us that our hardest and most vulnerable and sensitive and like difficult experiences do not disqualify us from joy and connection and purpose. In many ways, Chiron and all that it symbolizes deepens our relationship to the appreciation for being alive. And I also just want to say this, okay? Before we go sign by sign, you are not your wound. You are not doomed by your birth chart. Astrology is a language. It's not a limitation. The point of understanding your Chiron isn't to put yourself in an emotional chokehold and diagnose yourself into oblivion, right? The point is beginning to understand yourself with greater compassion so that instead of chronically shaming yourself, it's giving Chiron's mommy, you can actually zoom in on those deep karmic wounds and maybe bring some healing and integration into the mix. Okay, so let us now get into Chiron through every single zodiac sign, what hurts, why it hurts, how it shows up in your life, and the very, very magical ways that Chiron will and can and should become part of your medicine and really become a core piece of your healing journey. But honey, don't just listen for yourself, okay? It's a tea party. So listen for your partner, listen for your parents, listen for your friends, your siblings, your boss, your teachers, whoever is important to you, listen for their Chiron, because understanding someone's Chiron is going to completely change the way that you relate to them. Like truly. I mean, it is the key to the chart for a reason, okay? When you understand someone's Chiron, you understand them, period. So coming up, we are going to talk about Chiron through every single sign, what it's doing, and what it means for you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a very short break. Welcome back, community. Today we are unpacking Chiron, that beautiful, painful, gorgeous, complicated archetype that speaks to your greatest wounds. We talked about the mythology, which was like, what a story. But now it's time to talk about your mythology, okay? We are going to go sign by sign through Chiron in the chart, unpacking the wound, the lesson, the patterns, and the amazing ways that you can experience the most profound healing through it. Remember, we're not diagnosing. We are not locking ourselves into this place so that we can spiral. We are not deciding that we are doomed and gloomed because of something like a Chiron. Astrology is an art. Astrology is healing, right? Chiron was an astrologer. Chiron is healing, right? That's why you're here, because you are healing something, somewhere, somehow. It's tea, it's tank, and it is time to get this show on the road. So let's begin through the signs, starting, of course, with Chiron and Aries. Chiron and Aries, which also, just to mention, is where Chiron in the sky has been for the past several years, since 2018. All of us should be listening for Chiron and Aries because we have all been going through a Chiron in Aries journey in our own way since 2018. In Monday's episode, I talked about what has been going on for you basically since 2018, since this Chiron and Aries story began. But if you have Chiron and Aries in your birth chart, this also means that you have been going through your Chiron return. And I'm going to explain what that means in just a moment, okay? Let's first just talk about what Chiron and Aries in your birth chart is doing. Broadly, it speaks to wounds around your identity and your confidence and your autonomy and your right to simply just exist as yourself. People with this placement often learned or felt really early on that being themselves was risky and it came with consequences. Maybe expressing anger or autonomy or agency wasn't safe. Maybe someone with Chiron and Aries couldn't actually be as brave as they knew they could be because that would have been destabilizing to the infrastructure of their reality. Maybe asserting themselves created conflict or rejection or shame, right? Shame is so Chiron coded. People who have Chiron and Aries were afraid to be themselves. And as adults, this obviously can create a really complicated relationship with self-love and confidence because Chiron and Aries people feel like they are just wired for rejection. They may be really hesitant to begin something new, even though that is so what Aries energy wants to do. They may second guess their instincts. They may find themselves wondering whether they've gone too far, and then also simultaneously worrying that they haven't done enough. Like, it is exhausting, right? But healing for Chiron and Aries is about learning how to love yourself, realizing that confidence isn't something that is bestowed upon you, right? Like, you are not knighted confidence. It actually is something, it's a muscle, and it grows every time you choose yourself or advocate for yourself or trust yourself, right? And then beautifully, people who have this placement often become incredibly motivational, aspirational, inspirational people in the world because someone who has Chiron and Aries knows what it feels like to doubt yourself, which means that you also know how to help people find belief in themselves, right? And as I mentioned, if you have Chiron and Aries, you just went through your Chiron return. So at some point between 2018 and now, or maybe you felt it this whole time, you personally experienced Chiron changing your relationship to healing. It takes Chiron about 50 years to orbit, so most people only have one Chiron return in their lifetime, usually between the ages of 49 and 51, and that makes this period of life a really transformational chapter. So for you, maybe you have been really confronted with a lot of questions around your identity and courage and confidence and authenticity. Who were you when this started? And who are you now, right? What happens when you have accepted that you can no longer wait for permission and then you just started to give yourself that permission that maybe is the permission that you really needed from the time you were very, very young? And think about how you have gone so deep in these past 7-8 years to figure out who you are. Like, you went to the core of your being. It's been very intense, but it's also been incredibly meaningful because for you with Chiron and Aries, your world is different now. There is a before and after to this journey, and you have more wisdom than you ever have had access to before. So now it's time to start thinking, what am I going to do with it? Chiron in Taurus. Okay, so Chiron is now moving into Taurus, which is why we're talking about Chiron so much this week. So all of us better be listening to this one. Listen, because Chiron in Taurus means that all of us are going to be going through some Chiron in Taurus transformations up ahead. So, reminder, I have your horoscope in our Monday episode in the weekly brew for what to expect for Chiron in Taurus for every sign. But if you have Chiron in Taurus in your birth chart, honey, this also means that you are about to have your Chiron return, which I'm going to explain momentarily, okay? If you have Chiron in Taurus in your birth chart, this speaks to wounds around safety, stability, self-worth, money. Yeah, unfortunately, the bank account may also be involved here, right? Maybe you grew up around scarcity or instability or in environments where having your wants and needs and safety was not guaranteed. Maybe there was a fragility around security. Maybe there was an anxiety around resources, or love somehow became tangled up with achievement or productivity or material things. There was shame around what you had. There was shame around what you did not have. Maybe you grew up in a financially stable household, but due to circumstances beyond your control, you just never felt worthy. And as we become fully formed people, Chiron in Taurus is going to show up as fear around loss. There's this fear that you are constantly going to have to chase something your whole life. And there's almost this sensation that no matter how much you have, it's never going to be enough, because the enough that you're seeking isn't really having a certain amount in the bank, right? It's actually this ineffable feeling of being whole and fulfilled and feeling complete. So for you, healing comes through redefining what security actually looks like. Safety isn't just money. You know that, right? It's relationships, it's trust, it's knowing how to regulate your nervous system, it's knowing how to care about yourself, it's knowing how to love yourself even during difficult times. Over time, Chiron and Taurus people often become deeply grounding presences for others, and they remind people of these very facts, right? Abundance is not just about accumulation. It's about finding that safety and that security and that constant knowing within yourself, right? It's listening to yourself. And as I mentioned, if you have Chiron and Taurus in your birth chart, get ready to experience your Chiron return at some point between now and 2034, because honey, Chiron has not been in Taurus. It has not been in your sign since the 70s. Chiron takes around 50 years to move across the whole zodiac to do a full orbit. So this is very likely, unless you are listening to this and you're 100 years old, which like if you are, like please leave a comment, go off, slay. This is going to be your one and only Chiron return. So if you have Chiron in Taurus, this is not like a casual little moment, okay? This is a major chapter. It's a reckoning. You are going to need to confront what you have built safety around, for better or for worse, okay? Is it money? Is it productivity? Is it feeling like you're needed? Is it being so self-sufficient that nobody can ever touch you, right? Is it creating the optics of success? Is it having control? Because Chiron in Taurus is going to reveal, as you go through your Chiron return, the places where those survival strategies, which are real, have actually overrode the real healing and the deeper security that is going to come from within. So maybe you're going to have some financial shifts, right? Maybe you are going to need to be reconciling and reconsidering your relationship with your body or aging or pleasure or self-worth or rest, or reevaluating just what sustains you at large. Taurus is ruled by Venus. So it is sensual, it is embodied, it wants to feel rooted, which means that your Chiron return is going to ask you, like straight up, where have you been leaving yourself behind, abandoning yourself in pursuit of an illusion of stability? And how can you create real stability in trusting your honest desires over anything else? By the end of this journey, 2034, you are going to finally have the insight and the wisdom to start releasing those fears around scarcity and worthiness and those survival instincts that have held you back by, making you feel like you can only do certain things and not do others. Like, you're going to have real freedom by the end of this. It's big healing, baby, big breakthroughs. This is going to be a very tremendous time in your life. So we're going to be rooting for you, okay? But I also know you got this. Chiron in Gemini speaks to wounds around communication, intelligence, being understood, finding your voice, knowing your voice, hearing your voice, letting others hear your voice. People with this placement often grew up feeling misunderstood, or like constantly like they're being interrupted or dismissed or criticized for how they express themselves. Maybe you talk too much, maybe you talk too little, maybe you felt like your ideas weren't welcome or good enough or smart enough, or they just were not being received, like they were falling on deaf ears, right? And maybe when it comes to the way that you share, you felt like it was easier for you to just say what other people wanted you to say than actually say what you thought or believed or felt or needed. And this can be really sneaky in adulthood because Chiron and Gemini people are often brilliant communicators who still are deep down worrying that they sound ridiculous. So someone who is Chiron and Gemini is maybe over-explaining or concealing things that they're worried are going to make people get mad at them. And then they end up getting in more trouble because they're not sharing the whole truth, but really they were just trying to make things less stressful, right? Like Chiron and Gemini people constantly replaying conversations. They're like, wait, did I sound weird? Wait, are they mad at me? Like, baby, no one is mad at you. No one is mad at you. And if they were mad at you, they would tell you. And if they don't tell you, that is their problem, right? That is what they need to be working on with their therapist. You feel me? For you, healing is going to come through trusting your own voice, even when it feels like you are not being heard. Chiron and Gemini people often become extraordinary teachers and writers and communicators and translators of like the most complex ideas, like philosophical, theoretical ideas, musical, societal structures, like really deep, heady things, because they know what it feels like to struggle for clarity. So for someone who has Chiron and Gemini in their chart, like they are amazing at both teaching, making sure people understand, but more importantly, making sure that people feel understood. And the Chiron and Gemini gift is creating a language that everybody can rally behind so that everyone has a seat at the table. Oh my goodness, Chiron in Cancer, my placement, my people. Hello, friends. Chiron in Cancer carries wounds around emotional safety and nurturing and home and belonging and family dynamics. Yes, 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 TTT. People with this placement often learned early that care was inconsistent or complicated or conditional. They had to grow up fast. They had to become caretakers. Probably before they even learned how to take care of themselves. More tea. Maybe home felt like a very stressful place. There was no safety there. Or, there was just nowhere for the Chiron and Cancer person to just go and relax and unwind. Whether that is like seeking a physical space or an emotional space, that was just never really consistently available to someone with Chiron and Cancer. And then as we grow up and we become adults, Chiron and Cancer people become very nurturing, right? Because they know how to do that very well, but they still struggle to take care of themselves. Chiron and Cancer, everyone's therapist, everyone's emotional support person. Everyone is relying on the Chiron and Cancer to go above and beyond, to remember the birthdays and do the check-ins and carry the emotional labor of everyone and everything, all while Chiron and Cancer is totally neglected. They're starving. They haven't slept, they haven't showered, like they are just not taking care of the most basic fundamental needs because Chiron and Cancer believes that they need to pour out for everyone else in order to have personal value. Maybe that is how Chiron and Cancer will one day be loved. No. Oh my goodness. My Chiron and Cancer friends. No. We need to take a shower. For us, healing comes from realizing that being cared for is and should be and has always been, even if you didn't have it, unconditional, right? You do not need to give yourself love only as a reward. Ew, right? Like you should be giving yourself love and tenderness because you're a human and you deserve it. You should be able to give yourself safety because you have the right for safety. And when you can start to look at those pain points and really integrate them, Chiron and Cancer people do become extraordinary healers for others. But here's the thing, okay? Chiron and Cancer people can be healers and not be healed. So the real evolution of this is recognizing that being a healer for others does not mean becoming everyone's emotional dumping ground. It does not mean that you are there responding to every 2 a.m. crisis text, absorbing everyone's chaos, becoming the unpaid therapist for every emotionally unavailable person who is out there on Hinge, right? Like T. because Chiron and Cancer people are so naturally nurturing that there is this impulse to confuse giving with intimacy, or burning yourself out emotionally with love. And no, babe, that's not happening. We are retiring that narrative. Your gift with Chiron and Cancer is creating emotional safety for yourself, not emotional dependency on anyone else. It's knowing how to make people feel seen, protected, understood, and cared for, while also teaching them how to care for themselves. When Chiron and Cancer really starts to heal, the beautiful realization is that love needs to include you too. And that means that you get to have boundaries. You get to have rest. You get to say, I love you, but I can't have this conversation right now. And that is your medicine. Chiron in Leo. Chiron in Leo, friends, where you at? Okay, so Chiron in Leo, wounds around visibility, creativity, self-expression, being seen, being on stage, having the spotlight, right? Somewhere along the way, there was the message received that your visibility came with consequences. Maybe you felt teased or judged or shamed, right? Chiron and shame, they are always together, right? They go hand in hand. Maybe there was the feeling like if you had attention on you, that it was going to be negative, either directly or indirectly. Maybe you learned that, yeah, applause is available if I play a certain role. I can't be my authentic self. No way. I would never get recognition. And in our life, like as we get older, this Chiron and Leo energy can create this really complicated relationship with visibility, because Chiron and Leo people desperately need to express themselves, but they also are very afraid of being judged so deeply that it actually becomes a sort of paralysis for the creative expression. Chiron and Leo makes creativity feel very vulnerable in this really hardcore way, because it feels like you're just constantly bleeding out. But healing happens when you actually integrate the wound and fold that fear into bravery. Chiron and Leo people are artists and performers and teachers and creators and confidence builders and the ultimate cheerleaders, because they know what it feels like when you are dimmed, right? They know what it feels like when you aren't actually able to showcase your talents and skills and abilities. So Chiron and Leo people are really inspiring, because no, they haven't always been able to just throw themselves into the spotlight. They have learned how to do that. They have learned how to build that muscle. And then all of us benefit from it because we see that it's possible. So my Chiron and Leo friend, I need you to truly commit to your talents and abilities. I need you to realize that the things that you are scared of aren't just things that are possible. They are things that are happening. They are things that should happen. And when you celebrate the fact that you do deserve a chance to showcase your amazing abilities, you are also going to remind others that there's nothing wrong with shining. And in fact, there is truly nothing more beautiful than sharing your magic. If you have Chiron in Virgo in your birth chart, no doubt your wound manifests around perfectionism and usefulness and productivity and feeling like you are good enough. Chiron in Virgo people tragically grew up believing that love and approval and safety come through being helpful and organized and somehow flawless, right? Maybe for you, mistakes would feel catastrophic, right? Like if you didn't get an A on an exam, it was a disaster. If you dropped something too loudly in your house, like someone yelled at you, or maybe you always felt like there was just this standard and expectation, and no matter how hard you tried, you always were falling short, right? Like you could never hit the goal. Or maybe it was the people in your life, your parents, your teachers, the environment that you were raised in, they were always trying to make you better. They were always trying to fix you up, make you more normal. Honey, Chiron in Virgo speaks to an inner critic of truly epic proportions, okay? Chiron and Virgo people struggle with these impossible standards and expectations and overthinking and just this feeling of like never actually being good, never being good enough. But baby, you are never going to be able to fully integrate this if you are constantly in a state of self-judgment. How could you heal when you are constantly judging and shaming yourself, right? Healing comes through softness. It comes through understanding that worthiness is not performance driven, right? No KPIs here. It comes through accepting that being human means, hey, you're imperfect. And because Chiron was so recently discovered and it's therefore like a super, super modern astrological placement. It doesn't have a traditional ruler, right? Like the way that sun is the ruler of Leo or the moon is the ruler of Cancer. But some modern astrologers have suggested that Chiron be the ruler of Virgo, which is so tank and so T. And tank, there are no coincidences, because if there's really any sign uniquely poised to understand the work of healing, it is Virgo. Virgo is the healer. It understands the process of healing. It understands that healing is a practice. So part of the magic here, there's magic here, is the fact that Chiron and Virgo people are uniquely equipped to elevate this placement for everyone, because they know how to turn healing into a practice. When you give yourself the medicine on a daily basis, you take your vitamins, you know that it is not about hyper-perfectionism. It is messy, but it is always there, right? It's a constant. And you help people understand that healing happens in the everyday, right? Like magic in the mundane, in the routines, in the choices, in the boundaries, in the willingness to try again. So Chiron and Virgo people are innately amazing therapists and coaches and doctors and teachers and organizers and guides, because they know how to meet people where they are and gently help them find a way forward, which is the exact same medicine that they need to offer themselves. Big healing, divas. Okay, we are really, really sipping a deep steep today. But after the break, we have some more signs to talk about. Libra through Pisces, to be exact. Be sure to listen for your sign, but also the signs of everyone you know, because you want to understand what Chiron is doing in the people's charts that you love and care about, and you're like trying to figure out, okay? So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back, divas. We are continuing our very deep steep into Chiron through the zodiac, the wound, the medicine, the healing, the growth, the meaningful, profound ways that we learn to stop shaming ourselves and actually start celebrating ourselves. T. And just a reminder, I don't want you to hear your Chiron and be like, well, I guess that explains why I'm broken. No, honey, no damaged goods here, okay? This is about awareness. It's a language. It's an insight. Because when you actually put some words around what your reality is, suddenly it makes it a whole lot easier to start healing. That is what we're doing, so let's get back into it. Chiron and Libra, you're up next. If you have Chiron and Libra in your chart, your wound, no doubt, manifests through relationships and this concept of fairness and connection and harmony and like simply being invited. T. You're always invited to our tea party, just FYI. Now, maybe when you were a child, that wasn't the case. Maybe there were things where you were like, oh my gosh, like why am I being left out? Why am I being excluded? Or maybe you felt like you always needed to sort of like keep the peace and maintain the status quo. Maybe you felt responsible for being the sort of mirror to others, right? And you were like calibrating yourself to hold space for other people's emotions and needs. Maybe you were like, oh, well, maybe if I look presentable enough, if I'm pretty enough, if I'm cool enough, if I'm smart enough, whatever enough, right? I'll be accepted, I'll be invited, I'll be allowed in. And it's not vain, right? Like even that is rooted in a sense of survival, like figuring out how to appease and maintain enough like neutrality and be palatable enough so that you can get by and actually get the kind of validation or nurturing or love that you were craving. Now, as we grow up and as an adult, your Chiron in Libra placement means that maybe you still continue to struggle with people pleasing or conflict avoidance, or this really painful tendency to lose yourself in relationships. You may find yourself shape-shifting and taking on qualities that you think people want you to be, right? Like they want you to be a certain way, so then you become that way. Maybe you only feel worthy when you are in a partnership, right? And then that creates a codependency. Or maybe you spend so much time trying to make sure that everyone feels okay and safe and happy and regulated that like you don't even know where you are, right? Like you don't know who you are, what you're doing, what you want, what you need, what you desire, because you were so worried about making sure that everyone else had like their teacup in front of them. Where's yours, right? It's right here for you. What you need to know is that while you have been preoccupied with this approval, deep down, what it has been hiding is a really, really deep fear of abandonment. So for you, healing comes through learning that it's okay to have conflict. It's okay to disagree. You can disappoint someone. That's okay. You're still deserving of love. You don't have to be everyone's cup of tea. That's tea. But you could still be that bitch, even when you are being a bitch, which is perhaps the deepest tea of them all, right? So for my Chiron in Libra people, I want you to know that for you, your healing journey looks like getting truly radically honest in your relationships. I want you speaking up sooner. I want you letting conflict happen. I want you to choose partnership where you can exist independently, right? Where you don't need to feel like in order for this relationship to function, you constantly need to be like accommodating, right? And also, fittingly, because Chiron reveals our own gifts and offerings, Chiron and Libra people are great mediators, are great therapists, are great matchmakers and artists and relationship coaches and community builders because they also understand that relationships are hard, right? So your medicine is teaching people that healthy connection should not require you on any level to give up on yourself. And when you teach that, you learn that and you become that. So honey, Chiron and Libra babies, get to teaching. Ooh, Chiron and Scorpio, baby. Hello. This one is intense. Katrin just told me her Chiron is in Scorpio. Tea. Okay, Chiron in Scorpio. We are talking about wounds around trust. Yes. We are talking about wounds around vulnerability, intimacy. Yes. Control. Yes. Betrayal. Yes. Power. Yes. Emotional survival. You bet your bottom dollar. People with this placement often experience something early in life that taught them that people are not to be trusted. And in order to really know what is going on, you always have to have your guard up. You always have to be in stealth mode, investigating in your trench coat and your sunglasses so no one sees you coming. Maybe there were secrets in your family. Maybe you witnessed betrayal at a very young age. Maybe you felt personally violated. Maybe you learned that the only way that you could ever stay safe is to always stay 10, 15, 20 steps ahead. And then as adults, Chiron and Scorpio people are really desperately craving intimacy, but they are also fearing it, like truly with every fiber of their being. They're testing people. They're setting people up for failure, which means they're also setting themselves up for failure, right? We call that self-sabotage, baby. Chiron and Scorpio people often have incredible instincts, but sometimes that intuition gets tangled up with the fear or the suspicion or the desperation for control. But for you, my Chiron in Scorpio friend, healing looks like your ability to transform, including your ability to alchemize the past and what has happened to you, recognizing that the things that were out of your control when you were young have no reason to remain out of control in your adult life. You know what I mean? You don't need to keep recreating the same cycles. You can see them and then you can transmute them. You can evolve with them. You can change. You can grow. And the medicine of that is extraordinary because when you heal, you also become the person who can sit with others in their darkest moments without batting an eye. You are the friend who can hold grief and heartbreak and fear and addiction and loss and shame. Yes, shame, the Chiron word, and all of the things that others are usually afraid to talk about. And you can be really steady in those spaces and be like, I'm here, you're here, we're safe. Let's walk through this difficult time together. And then you realize that you can offer that because you can also give that to yourself too. And that is a different vibration and frequency than being suspicious or being paranoid or being 10 steps ahead. Like, honey, that's just compassion. And when you can tap into that beautiful, intuitive kindness and compassion for yourself, then that is really when the healing journey starts. If you have Chiron and Sagittarius in your birth chart, your wound is going to manifest around meaning and truth and belief systems and freedom and hope and possibilities. Maybe you grew up in an environment where curiosity felt dangerous. Maybe your worldview was not your own, but in fact rigidly imposed upon you. Maybe you weren't allowed to question things. Maybe you weren't allowed to explore things. Maybe the idea of ever touching and experiencing and familiarizing yourself with something more, something bigger, something different, was so destabilizing to either you or the people in your life or your community or the safety of what you were relying on that you were like, I shouldn't even go there, right? So then you wrote it off completely. And Chiron and Sagittarius can create this like really heartbreaking relationship with hope, because Sagittarius is so powerfully and beautifully and like blatantly optimistic. But with Chiron there, it's like you want to believe in the possibility, but you also are so afraid of being disappointed. And you maybe even have this deep-seated shame around having that type of hope or optimism embedded in your spirit, right? Like it was not safe for you to feel that way. So then you're swinging between idealism and cynicism. One moment you're thinking about your future and your dream life, and then the next you're like, actually, forget it. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. But baby, come on. That is not where we want to be. We don't want to be in a space of feeling like something more would create collapse of what we have. It reminds me of the Tower card. It reminds me of that story of recognizing that like if lightning was going to strike a tower and it was going to collapse, like that was going to inevitably happen to begin with. It wouldn't have been you that brought that upon yourself for asking questions about like the architecture or the foundation or the buttressing or the infrastructure. You know what I mean? For you, healing comes through rediscovering your curiosity and through asking questions, through being a perpetual student, through being open to new perspectives, through tapping into new experiences that remind you of how much more can exist outside of whatever your current reality is. Healing looks like saying yes, but even moreover, it looks like a willingness to change your mind and to allow your beliefs to evolve with time and wisdom and experience. And when Chiron and Sagittarius people heal, they become teachers and storytellers and philosophers and scientists and guides, spiritual leaders, even comedians, because they can help other people expand their point of view by not being afraid of challenging where they come from. They can help people imagine something beyond whatever they feel limited and stifled by, right? Like you with a Chiron and Sagittarius remind others that like change is okay, right? Like you can leave environments, you can ask questions, you can poke holes in the status quo. Like you don't have to make sure that everything is held up by not looking at it. Like you can look at it, and if it all collapses, it was a house of cards. Chiron and Sagittarius people have this extraordinary ability to help others reconnect to meaning, not through being didactic or pedantic or preaching, right? It doesn't have to be like, I have all the answers and you don't. It's actually inviting people to join them in conversation and curiosity. And that means for you, my friend, staying curious about your healing journey is your medicine. If you have Chiron in Capricorn, your wound no doubt manifests around achievement, responsibility, authority, success, what you deem as worthiness. People with this placement often had to grow up way too fast. There was a pressure to actually have everything figured out. Maybe love felt very conditional, very much a response to being successful. Maybe there was this like constant praise for being mature and responsible, for being the most together one in your family, right? While really carrying burdens and heaviness that no child should ever be responsible for. Like it should not have been your job to do all of those things, but because it was, there became this like intrinsic relationship of how much you can carry on your back and how good you are. So then as adults, Chiron and Capricorn people believe that they are nothing without respect, right? Like And I get it. It's important to be respected. But what does it look like to have to fight for that respect? Like, do you need to fight for respect? Is that something that you should be constantly trying to like go to battle for? And what is the shame around that, right? Like, it's overworking, taking on too much, never asking for help. I mean, no one could ever help you, right? Like, no one could do it better than you. No one can touch what you do. That's what you believe. That's what you learned, right? So you tie your worth to achievement, and then you may find yourself wondering, like, why am I never satisfied? Why is it never enough? Spoiler, my friend, it's because there is a larger sadness there, right? At the core of it is this ineffable sadness, this ineffable hole that cannot be filled by climbing any corporate ladder or through achieving a coveted role on any hierarchy, right? It is this feeling of just not being good enough as you are. So healing for someone with Chiron in Capricorn needs to come through redefining success altogether, through realizing that your humanity, your emotional health, your tenderness, your gentleness, the little you who just wanted to be held, it's at the core of everything you do. And in this really beautiful way, Chiron and Capricorn people often become amazing mentors and leaders and yes, executives, but also like teachers and therapists and guides, because they can help people get to the root of things, right? They know what it feels like to have way too much on their plate. They know what it feels like to carry the weight of the world on their back. But they can also help people figure out their true calling and their fullest potential, because Chiron and Capricorn people can understand what is driving the motivation. You know where it comes from. And when that is integrated into the Chiron and Capricorn experience, it's not just chasing success because you are trying to achieve an impossible standard. It's something that is truly rooted in pleasure and play and creativity. And then you're like, wait, I actually really like doing these things. I actually really like working in these ways, or showing up in my industry, doing X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. And then it's not because you are trying to prove yourself. It is because you are trying to give that little you joy. You are trying to make sure that all versions of you have a seat at the table. All versions of you are being considered and recognized and appreciated. And then there's this beautiful synthesis between achieving and also healing. Chiron in Aquarius speaks to wounds around belonging and community, feeling different, feeling understood, feeling misunderstood, right? People with this placement often feel like outsiders, or at least they did growing up, right? Maybe they were too weird. Maybe they were a little bit ahead of their time, or they just felt like they were too much of a unicorn in the tiny, small suburban town they come from. They felt misunderstood by their peers. They felt a little isolated. Maybe they felt misunderstood by their family. Maybe they were like the black sheep of their family, right? And somewhere along the way, there was this feeling that you would never fit in. And while part of you is like, okay, slay, that's fine, because I'm not like these other girls, right? Like, I'm not like these normies anyway. Another part of you is like, hello? Is there anyone out there? ET phone home? What planet am I on? Chiron in Aquarius people can be emotionally detached because they feel like their emotions don't matter, which is tea. You may convince yourself that you don't need people. You may keep a certain community or a certain connection at arm's length because it feels safer to preemptively create that boundary and set it on your own terms than be rejected. It's like, yeah, I never wanted to be part of that anyway. But honey, like, humans are relational beings, right? Like, it's okay to want to belong in certain places. And understanding that that impulse to isolate may not always be rooted in independence, but also may be rooted in this fear of rejection. And if that's true, like, that's okay. That doesn't mean that you are weak or that you're a conformist or that something's wrong with you. It's just really about trying to understand why you created walls and what that looked like from this Chiron shame safety point of view. So for you, healing does come through finding aligned community. It has to, right? Through realizing that belonging is not about shrinking yourself to fit in, but actually allowing yourself to know yourself enough to find the right people to see you And yeah, even as the world is burning and there is so much that needs to happen on a collective level, you are also just like one person living, laughing, loving through this life, right? And your story is also the collective story, which means that your story individually still matters. And when Chiron in Aquarius heals, that medicine becomes so potent because you have the ability to remind people that being different is beautiful, that it is okay to sometimes feel alone and be a lone wolf. And it's also okay to be part of a pack, right? You can help people feel like they belong. You can create spaces where people can show up exactly as they are. And that's how you can build a community. And that is how you can change the world. And that is how you can make a difference. And then you can actually be like, oh, yeah, I guess this is what life is actually about. It's about healing. And finally, Chiron in Pisces. Any placement in Pisces, I'm like, oh, my little mermaid. Hello, my little magical psychic mermaid. And Chiron in Pisces is no different. No, no, no. Chiron in Pisces speaks to wounds around boundaries and sensitivities and being emotionally overwhelmed and the shame around being so sensitive and the shame around spirituality and then needing to escape and run away and like completely disappear because you can't handle it all. Oh my goodness, okay? People with Chiron in Pisces often grew up really desperately needing to absorb the emotions of everyone and everything around them because they literally had to. In order to understand why someone was being that way, why they were creating an unsafe environment for our Chiron and Pisces friend, our Chiron and Pisces friend, you, had to literally absorb the depth of the situation, right? Like you had to become so compassionate that you basically had to become a martyr, right? Because if we're being honest, no one should have to go to those depths in order to empathize, right? Like you shouldn't empathize with the abductor, right? Like that's Stockholm syndrome. But Chiron in Pisces gives Stockholm syndrome because empathy should not come at the cost of your own safety and happiness and well-being. This is tea. If you learned in your childhood, in the womb, in some sort of like primordial core way, that in order for you to survive, you had to literally emotionally become your captors, then obviously that rages on. And as adults, Chiron and Pisces people are going to struggle with boundaries, right? Lots of confusing feelings around suffering and love and your psychic ability. Maybe you find yourself absorbing everyone else's problems and then wondering why you are so emotionally exhausted and you don't have time to take care of yourself. Maybe when things become really, really overwhelming, instead of like setting boundaries and being like, actually, I can't take that on, or like, actually, that was really fucked up of you, escapism starts looking very tempting. You're like, maybe I'll just go to this dive bar until 5 o'clock in the morning. Maybe I will just go on yet another ayahuasca trip. Maybe I will just disappear on this strange jam band cruise for the next 3 weeks. Bye. You can't find me. But baby, this is such a beautiful placement. And it really is such a testament to the fact that healing manifests through grounding into your sensitivities from a rooted, practical, embodied place as opposed to a traumatized and triggered one. For you, healing is really this beautiful, spiritual, magical, divine expression, but not in a way where you lose your connection to reality, actually in a way where you bring reality into your magic. You get things on this profoundly deep cellular level, yes, but the real embodied experience of Chiron and Pisces is also figuring out how you can take that wisdom and directly apply it to your life. So Chiron in Pisces people, amazing artists, therapists, intuitives, healers, musicians, spiritual leaders, rabbis, priests, like it's really like the job of anyone who can translate emotion into meaning. Your medicine is empathy, but the real magic is when you start giving that empathy back to yourself first and foremost. Like, I promise you that you have enough compassion and kindness for everyone, like literally for everyone on earth. But first, before you start doling that out to strangers, right? To people that you see on the subway, to people you're arguing with or afraid to argue with on the internet, all of that love and healing has to first be directed towards you. And what you have left, you can give out, and it's going to be the same amount that you're giving out now, but it is first going to start from you feeling stable, grounded, self-love, protected. And then, yeah, everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves some compassion and empathy, but that always has to begin with what you give yourself first. What do you think about today's episode? Where's your Chiron? What did you learn? Did it resonate? What breakthroughs did you have? Tell me. Let me know in your 5-star reviews. Let me know in your comments. And of course, tell your friends. Tell everyone about AstroloTea with Aliza Kelly. That's the real healing journey, okay? I'll be back on Monday, of course, with your weekly brew, and that's your horoscope. And then next Wednesday, we'll have another tea party. Make sure you tune in every Monday and every Wednesday for every episode of AstroloTea with Aliza Kelly on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And I will see you soon. Bye.